Thank you, Holden Sheppard, so much for speaking with Lavoisier about your second book, The Brink.
Thank you for having me, Alice. It's a pleasure to be back.
And I should say it's been out for some time now, but the day that we are recording this interview is the official big release in Perth tonight. So thank you very much for carving a bit of time out of your afternoon to speak with us. I feel very special. My first question is, as always, like a technical one. And that's, what did you find was different from writing, just a piece of contemporary fiction to writing a thriller, which The Brink is?
Yeah, The Brink it's quite a different beast to Invisible Boys. And I think there was a part of me that, because Invisible Boys was such a personal story and it was so, the promotion of it and the creative development of it itself was so much entwined with my own growing up story that it felt like maybe I was pouring my life into books, and it was like I was doing some kind of trauma porn or vulnerability porn where, it's just, here I am plating up, horrible things that have happened to me, and that's the kind of author I'm going to be. So I think there was a sense within me that I wanted to show that, like, hi, I can write a book. I can write a book that's a really good story. It's still got great characters. It's still got the emotional heart and the complexity of contemporary YA, but it is going to lean into genre. It's going to lean into a bit of a mystery thriller, and it's fast, and you'll read it, and it's action packed. So there was a part of me that really wanted to kind of, I don't know if I wanted to. I mean, it was the story that was in me anyway, but I think there was certainly a sense that I didn't want to just repeat Invisible Boys and become known for doing something well worn and just repeat that over and over. Like, I didn't want to break everyone's heart this time necessarily. So that, yeah, it was quite different to kind of write something a bit more. It was less heartbreaking, less sad to write, and it was probably more empowering. Like, there's probably a sense of anger in the characters that actually leads to a lot of empowerment at the end, especially. So that was quite different to kind of working through trauma with the first book. This was kind of like almost exciting, like, to write it. It was almost an exciting sensation.
Yeah, that makes actual sense. Like, yeah, I see where you're going with that, because there is that anger, and I think the characters do something with the anger and let the anger drive them. Do you think as well that writing through a genre lens, as opposed to just, contemporary or literary, also allowed for you to take, some of the similar ideas that you were exploring in Invisible Boys, but put them in a slightly more abstract format that gave you the distance to also write the story?
Yeah, I think packaging it into a genre or thriller. I think as well, I was very aware that some people will not love diving into a story that's billed as character driven and slow and contemplative and sitting in their heads the whole time. But they will go, oh yeah, I'll read to find out who dies. The very first page of The Brink is like, look, it didn't start with the dead body, but here we are. And then you kind of cut to 2 days earlier. So the carrot is kind of dangled right at the start that there's a dead body. You're about to find out who these people are, and then who's dead and how it's all kind of going to unfold. And so I think I just knew, probably especially, younger readers or reluctant readers or male readers or whatever might be more likely to pick up something that's really easy to read. It's plot driven, it's fast. And that would actually then I could kind of Trojan horse maybe some of the complexity into that story, because there's actually, Leonardo, Kaya, and Mason have a lot of complexity going on emotionally. And it's all like, I actually feel like I Trojan horse therapy into this book, to be honest, like, especially with what Leonardo goes through, like he's processing a lot of feelings, and it's almost a little bit, maybe not psychological because it's not that complex, but it's definitely kind of leading into that kind of therapeutic vibe.
Yeah, well, I think of all the characters, like, Mason's lying to himself, but not very well. like he knows, he just doesn't want to admit it, which is fair enough. And I've forgotten the name of your female protagonist, and that's
Kaya.
Kaya. I was going to be like Kay, but thank you. Kaya, again, she's not not aware of anything. She's kind of deciding how she wants to respond to, the circumstances in which she finds herself. Leonardo actually is the one that has to like peel back a whole lot of realizations and revelations before he can actually do anything with that information, if that makes sense. Like he needs to actually know it before he then can move forward.
Yeah, and I think and I think that is the therapy part, right? Like so much of our lives, like for anyone who hasn't, or for anyone who has gone through that process of going to counselling or therapy or whatever, you just have such a sense of like everything's fine, I'm fine, it's all good, and then you kind of sit down with it for 5 seconds, and you're like, oh my god, like I'm not okay, like if I stop and I really reflect, and Leonardo's forced to stop and reflect on this island. It's unavoidable that he's finally away from his family and his mother and his friends, and suddenly forced to reflect. He is forced to go, I have not been okay for a very long time. Now that I'm by myself and I don't have any of these influences around me, it actually is safe to be myself. So who the hell am I? Can I, I don't have to put up that persona anymore. So who do I want to be inside? And, there's a lot of, there is a lot of correlation with Leonardo's kind of trajectory and my own. So I do feel quite invested in that, especially as his story kind of unfolds and finishes. There's a lot of similarities there.
Yeah, I found his arc to be the most like satisfying and cathartic in a lot of ways, I think. But it comes back to the question of genre, right? Like these sort of, the Trojan horse of therapy, or sort of therapy, and the unpacking of expectations and circumstance and history, that is facilitated by the plot device of the isolation. That is like a very much almost like a very like horror thriller murder mystery trope, which is everyone's kind of stuck in an isolated environment. So it's a really interesting thing to see how something you wanted to explore was facilitated by a hallmark of the genre.
Yes, and it was really deliberate. And actually, you're right. It's almost more horror than thriller, or it feels like it might be. It's not a horror story at all. But a few readers have commented that once they kind of get trapped once they even go to the island, and like Machete Max there, and then they're stuck on the island, and a few people have been like, this felt like horror. It felt like it felt like everyone was going to get murdered. Like all the characters were going to go. A bit of a like I Know What You Did Last Summer, like that kind of.
Or Agatha Christie, and then there were none.
Yeah. Like it just, and I love those kind of. My husband's a big fan of horror, so I've kind of sat there watching all the TV series of horror over the years, and I love that there often are closed circle kind of mysteries, and I pretty much I really like them. If everyone's in a hotel, there's a blizzard, no one can get out. It just raises the stakes and the tension really dramatically, and forces like any small thing can catalyze someone to snap or someone to finally face their demons in a good way, or actually be destroyed by their demons. So yeah, the island was quite deliberate, and I think a little bit of the structuring thing of what I was thinking as well as I was writing it was that the island was sort of representative of like how absolutely batshit crazy high school is. So the book is set on the island from Monday to Friday, like a school week, and then they. And then Saturday, without spoiling what happens, after high school, you get out into the real world. And so, I want to kind of actually use that, not just as a device of making stuff happen and ratcheting up tension and stakes, but also a little bit metaphorically of like, this is, high school's nuts. It's not real, it's not reflective of the real world, but it can be like its own little Lord of the Flies. And with the power structures and the social kind of taboos and tensions and whatever else. So this is the characters trying to break out of the persona they built to survive high school, essentially.
No, I think that's really, I really, and especially now that school is very clever. The other question that I have is, so you have, your three separate characters, and because you wanted to explore three different things, and so you, in some ways, you almost siloed them out. How do you balance like siloing characters to have really distinct and really different, almost archetypal features or characteristics without making them into archetypes or stereotypes?
Yeah, it is tough, and I mean, I don't know that I don't know that I totally escape it, maybe, but I think I have been able to set up like Invisible Boys and this book, really, where you've got kind of three characters who you could kind of one-dimensionalize really easily, and they could come across as like really generic stereotypes, but somehow they don't. They all feel very individual and quite alive. Well, I think so, but you know, like the feedback seems to be that they weren't kind of cardboard cutout characters.
No, they weren't.
And all I can think, I mean, this one came first actually. So the BRINK I started writing this in 2014. So I had already done about 30,000 words of this thing where there was 3 narrators. So these ones were first. And when I wrote Invisible Boys, I had, it was just about Hammer initially. And then I, you know, sitting with the BRINK, sitting with this thing about Hammer, and I was like, oh, hang on, what if I had 3 point of views in this Hammer story, and you know, this little musician guy at the start had a actual point of view, and this Italian waiter at the wedding, Zeb, who became Zeke, you know, what if he had a point of view as well? So I'd started it with the BRINK, I then plundered it for Invisible Boys in a way, and if you want to, you can pretty easily see like a little dotted line between like Zeke and Leonardo, Kaya and Charlie, Hammer and Mason, because these ones came first, you know, Leonardo, Kaya and Mason were first. But yeah, the way I kind of really try to differentiate it, not always, you know, I'm sure it's not always perfect, but I usually have a word or two for each character where I'm like, this is their attitude and their vibe. And so I know that when I'm writing Leonardo, like, okay, he's shy, like, or no, Zeke was shy. Leonardo was like anxious. He was terrified. So I didn't think about, like, I know there's probably very good advice of like, you have to think about what your character's motivation is, or like, you know, why would the character do this? But I tend to be more gut driven. So if I'm like, okay, I'm writing a Leonardo chapter now, Leonardo is always anxious and panic attacky and terrified. So I'm going to think about how do I feel when I'm anxious and panic attacky and terrified. And I write from a very gut driven place of tapping into that emotion of my own life. So I think that is maybe why I tend not to think of it emotionally as what would the character do. Emotionally, it comes from me. And what am I like when I'm shy? You know, with Kaya, what am I like when I'm like trying to stand up for myself, or, you know, or maybe I'm too emotionless. You know, Kaya's criticized for not being soft, soft enough with her friends. Or, you know, with Mason, like, you know, what am I like when I'm really cocky and I'm a real prick? You know, like how do I come across? And what would I say if I could say anything I want and just, you know, piss people off? It's actually really fun to tap into it writing in that way, because it channels something very, very real and almost autobiographical into a completely made up story and a completely made up character. And so I think that's why they feel a little bit alive.
Yeah, but keeps it also within a relatively safe space for you to express and explore as well.
So great, because I don't ever have to tell people which things are real and which are made up.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's perfect. You know, memoir is terrifying and quite exposing, but writing fiction drawn from real life is super fun, because you feel like you're kind of slaying all these demons, but none of the demons are coming at you and saying, "Hey, why did you write about me?" Because they either don't know, or they do know, but they don't want to reveal themselves as, you know, having been a terrible person.
I truly do believe that all fiction is in some ways semi-autobiographical. Like, it's driven from something that the writer either wants to express or wants to work through or wants to explore. So I think like I very much will do the similar thing to you, when I'm like, no, this is 110% like me exploring something now and sort of catharting it through the plot that I'm driving. And for some people it's just, you know, it's just a part of the process that you don't necessarily acknowledge. So no, I think that makes total sense. Final question is, if the BRINK, if Invisible Boys' legacy is allowing people to feel seen, what do you hope the BRINK's legacy will be?
What a beautiful question. about
thank you.
a writer's legacy. No, it really is. Because yes, Invisible Boys is that. I think the intention was I wanted all people, you know, guys like me, but not even just guys, like just people of like any gender, any age, any sexuality, like people feel really seen by that book, because it's about like letting go of that shame for being who you are. And I think just about everyone from any background has felt shame. I mean, everyone feels shame, it's human, but it can be so destructive when it's not acknowledged and when you kind of hide it in yourself. So that book, I think, was, as you say, help people feel seen, but in particular, you know, gay bogans and working class gay men, or yeah, you know, gay guys in the country, that kind of stuff, farmers, and truckers, FIFO workers, laborers. That was pretty cool for me. Like that was helping them feel seen was very rewarding, and I'm really proud of that book doing that. With the Brink, I think the thing that came out of it for me was that I wanted people to feel empowered at the end of this book to throw off any kind of persona they built up to survive and really tap into who they want to be on the inside. Leonardo's line towards the end about, you know, not wanting to be a volcano, you know, volcanic rock that's igneous, that settles in hard, firm place. And, you know, you end up representing this version of yourself to the world because that's who the world expects. But he's like, you know, what if you stay molten, if you stay like lava, then you can do whatever you want. You know, you can be driven by whatever you want to do. And it's an incredibly empowering concept to share with people who haven't necessarily been empowered in their lives, to say, what you want to do with your life is you. You know, if you want to set boundaries, you do it. If you want to change who you are, you do it. If you want to, it's, you know, it's your life. You can do what you want. So I think that's why the anger in this book, you know, if Invisible Boys is a sad book, this I think is an angry, maybe an angry book. But that anger has undertones of like, it's like self-liberation anger, it's empowerment. I want people to come out of this, reading this book, and feel like I can go stand up to that bully. I can go to my family dinner and bring my partner, you know, who, you know, like I can do these things, and I can face my demons. So, I mean, that's a very lofty aspiration, but, you know, so is the Invisible Boys one, let's face it. So I kind of hope that happens. I kind of hope people either get that from it in an emotional sense. I know a few readers already have, they've told me, especially younger readers. I was chatting to a young trans guy in Canberra who came to my event, and he was just like, I really, really loved Leonardo, and like Leonardo's journey just meant the absolute world to him. He was so touched. Which, yeah, and like it was this, you know, Leonardo's not gay or trans, you know, straight guy, but his struggle with his identity, I think, was quite relatable for that young dude. So I felt very honored by those kind of responses. I've had a few from gay men and a few from straight women and all kinds of things now. So yeah, I hope that happens, that empowerment and that feeling of like, I could do this too, comes through for other people. And if not, then I just hope they had a really good read and enjoyed a thriller and found out who got killed and who did it. You know, hopefully it works on both levels. No,
it does. And I actually think that the Brink, as someone who works with a lot of younger people, school age children, I think the Brink is one that's really going to hit a lot of younger readers in that demographic, especially. Whereas I think Invisible Boys, you almost needed to be a bit out of school to read it. Like you needed to be a few years, you know, I think in school you can read it, but to have it hit hard, you needed to have a bit of perspective. Whereas I think the Brink is really perfect for people of a school age. So, yeah.
I think you're right. I think you're right. And I think like often my readers will be, like when I'm talking about gay men reading it, yes, I do have gay teenagers reading it, but often it like once guys, like we, you know, they come out at 20 or whatever, you know, everyone's different, but they might come out at 20 and then like at 25, they're like, okay, I'm now ready to face what I went through 10 years ago at high school, and they read Invisible Boys and they're really ready for it in their 20s and onwards. So yeah, I'm hoping, and yeah, again, I think I was kind of Trojan horsing so much. I'm using that term way too much today, but I feel like a little bit of me was kind of not just putting in the therapy, but kind of going, look, here's a journey about identity, and maybe Mason's journey, particularly with being same-sex attracted. You know, maybe he's bisexual, maybe he's gay. He's not really, you know, probably gay, but you know, he's struggling with that identity, and I think maybe I was Trojan horsing that a little bit into maybe a more palatable sale to teenagers. Because Invisible Boys itself was kind of billed as, this is this big, massive gay novel, which is gritty and it has tons of sex in it, which is a hard sell if you're a head of English or a deputy principal in a high school. You know what I mean?
No, this is perfect. It's, when you're leaving school, like, what is the snake skin of expectation that has kind of been forced onto you that you're trying to slough off? So no, I think absolutely. We're going to have to wrap. You've got a book launch to get to, but Holden, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and good luck with the launch tonight.
Thank you heaps, Alice. It's been awesome chatting with you again. Cheers for the support. Love it.